want to welcome you all on behalf of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute and the Rumsfeld Foundation and CAMCA. Now, CAMCA has not quite become a household term, and so a word about it should be offered here. And that is, it refers to, as you know, Central Asia, Mongolia. Why Mongolia, you ask? Well, because all Central Asian countries find themselves squeezed between big powers, and Mongolia is the most squeezed between big powers, so it's natural that they be part of it. Central Asia, Mongolia, Caucasus, and what have we missed? Afghanistan. So we expanded the concept of Central Asia when the when the Rumsfeld Fellowship Program was started, and Secretary Rumsfeld and he pushed hard for Mongolia, I have to say. I pushed hard for Afghanistan, and so we just expanded the territory, and we're very pleased that we did so because we've had such wonderful fellows from every single country, and it's just for everyone connected with the program, whether it's here or in Europe or at our office in Sweden or in the Central Asia, the Caucasus itself, and in other major centers. Our former fellows and fellowesses have made extraordinary achievements already, and they are identified as part of this wonderful and very constructive and positive mafia. Now, today we have a grand topic. It's too big, but before I turn to it, I want to acknowledge Mamuka Tsereteli, who is out in the hall hiding, who has done so much to organize these programs. Of course, Sarah Tanucci and Bridget Sedlacek from the Rumsfeld Foundation, they are tireless and they've been on the case from day one with wonderful results. Svante Cornell, director of the Central Asia Caucasus Institute, is to be found usually on a seat on one of the transatlantic airlines because he commutes between Sweden and Washington. And he has, if you followed closely what he's been publishing recently on a number of topics pertaining to this region, you'll see he's absolutely on top of the issues and on the shortest list of real authorities on the entire zone. So introducing everyone, let me also encourage you to, if you're not addicted already to CACIanalyst.org, and to the silkroadstudies.org, you should be, and you should be contributing articles and essays to those publications as time goes on. Now, here's the problem. The region we're discussing is under exceptional pressure of external events today, which give rise to internal pressures. And each country has its own specifics, flavors, and so on, its own challenges, its own responses. The question we're looking at today is, yes, we want to appreciate the individual challenges and responses country by country. We also want to see if there's some kind of response on a regional basis that would be positive and constructive. This is roughly our agenda. I'm honored to turn the chairmanship of this event over to my colleague and friend, Svante Cornell. But before doing so, let me just tip a hat to Omar Sadr, who is late of American University in Kabul, wonderful institution, and he was doing great teaching there. And now at a post at University of Pittsburgh, which has become quite active in these parts of the world. And then Kanul Aliyeva from Azerbaijan. This is my goodness, how to put it, an entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur, it's fair to say, several times over, not just in Azerbaijan, but also in Turkey and Ukraine. and she will offer some observations on deriving from that. And then how could we do without Irmun Dembarel from Mongolia? He is an advisor to the Prime Minister of Mongolia on the area of economics and development. He is Vice President of the Mongolian Economic Cooperation Confederation. And in general, he's absolutely on top of the economic and international economic relations of his country. Finally, Nadira Muhammadkulova, excuse me, who is working for an organization involving UNDP, UNODC, and so on, several international groups that are focused on the Fergana Valley. This is a very big deal. If you don't know about the Fergana Valley, look at the book we published 10 years ago on the Fergana Valley, and it will indicate to you how central the Fergana Valley is, which isn't a valley, by the way, how central it is to the entire region, going hundreds and hundreds of miles in every direction. And she is trying to develop social harmony there through all sorts of interesting programs. So these are our speakers. I turn it over to Svante Cornell, and I now thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Fred for introducing our session today. This is, I should note, the first real session that the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute has organized in person. It appears that people are still reluctant to be in person, but we thank you for those of you who have actually joined us here in person. This is also being recorded and zoomed, so there are other people who might be watching. Maybe Mamuka might know if we'll be receiving questions from there as well. We'll figure that out. Without losing time, I'll pass over the microphone to our speakers, who will speak one by one until we are done and we can move to a discussion. I hope you have figured out an order among yourselves. Yes. Who will start? You will start. There you are, please.
Thank you so much. Let me first start with thanking Middle Eastern Institute for hosting us today, but also Central Asia Caucasus Institute, particularly David, and Rumsfeld Foundation, Bridget and Sarah, for having us here in DC and organizing such a wonderful fellowship for all of us. The topic that we would like to talk about today is confronting global challenges in CAMCA region. And let me say why we choose this. We are living amidst of three crises in greater Central Asia. It started with pandemic 2 years ago, but right after that, Afghanistan fell to the Taliban, and there's an emerging terrorist threat to the region. And finally, on 24th of February, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that invasion had it amplified crisis globally, but particularly for the Central Asia region. As Frederick Starr was saying, that the region is pressurized from these crises externally, and that somehow increases the pressure on government. Why? Because the region that we talk about is quite vulnerable. Can I have the second slide, please? The region, first of all, faces poor governance. It is geographically isolated, not connected to the world. It's also somehow dependent in multiple cases to Russia. At least there has been advance in terms of economic dependency. Now China is replacing Russia, but in terms of security guarantees, the region still depends on Russia. The region is also faced with food insecurity, and food insecurity somehow influences the security of region in multiple other dimensions. For instance, insurgency in Afghanistan, be it Daesh, ISIS, or the Taliban, recruit their fighters amongst the ones who are suffering, or those are the poorest of the country. And finally, corruption and poor governance also is one of the key indicators of the region. And that leads us to hard, violent kind of insurgency, which is now very on in Afghanistan, terrorism, and that will impact the region. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I will present you here episodes of instability, violent instability in the region. If you look at the list here, you will find two categories of conflicts, violent conflicts in the region. One are those which are within the countries. The source of these conflicts and instabilities are within the countries. For example, whether it is from Andijan event in 2005 in Uzbekistan, or some other kind of unrest that we recently witnessed in Kazakhstan. However, apart from this, the second type of conflict in the region is interstate conflicts, be it clash between Tajikistan or Kazakhstan, or in the other part of the region between Azerbaijan and Armenian. Now, in the second type of conflict, one of the key actors has been the great power in the region, which is Russia. Russia has been either in one side of the conflict, be it the recent clash between Tajiks and Kazakhs, or Azerbaijan and Armenian. So that's why when we talk about the region and its security, it's impossible to ignore the elephant in the room, which is the Russians. So that's why any kind of solution to the security in the region will lead us to the question, how can we address the issue of Russians here? Now, let me go to one of the key problems here, which is terrorism. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, here, one of the global terrorist organizations is, of course, now currently in Middle East and Central Asia is Daesh. The previous government of Afghanistan came with a finding which showed after Pakistan, the number of detainees of Daesh, the second group were Central Asians, be it from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. So that means this issue is not exclusive to Afghanistan. The recruitment, the fighters, ideology is a threat to the entire region, starting from Afghanistan, but it threatens the entire Central Asian countries. Now, let me give you some of the greatest findings from some of the policymakers here in the US, but also from the region, if I have the second slide. The recent report of the United Nations Security Council states that the terrorist groups enjoy greater freedom in Afghanistan than at any recent time in history. So this is after overthrow of the previous government of Afghanistan. But if you go a bit back, the same concerns has been flagged by the authorities in China, authorities in Russia, a neighboring country of Afghanistan, Tajikistan. But most recently, General McKelvey of CENTCOM was briefing the Senate, and he was saying that Daesh, which is IS, Islamic State, could establish an external attack capacity against the US and its allies in 12 to 18 months, but possibly sooner, because of the fact that Taliban, first of all, they don't have full control over the territory. And secondly, they have affinity, ideological affinity with the like-minded groups, including Al-Qaeda. So that's why this threat is quite feasible, and it's not far from us when it comes to terrorism. Yeah. Now, can I have the next slide, please? If this is a risk or the security threat that we are facing on, what are the possible solutions? Now, if you look at the region, the current security architecture looks like this. We have CSTO, which is established by Russia, but at the same time, we have Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Commonwealth of Independent States were established, but when Putin came into power, he established another institution, which is Eurasian Economic Community. Now, the entire identity of the region is shaped either by 5 stances in Central Asia, the narrow definition of it, but when you talk about the expanded region, a greater identity will be Eurasian region. But now the term Eurasian region has been coined by some of the right-wing ideologues in Russia. For example, Alexander Dugin was one of the exponents of this term. So, I mean, the entire identity of region is not self-driven or self-created. Rather, it is somehow shaped from outside. And it's quite clear because the region is economically and militarily dependent on Russia. Now, they cannot move out of Russian influence because, for example, when it comes to military, all sorts of supply of the armies in these 5 Central Asian countries, but also Caucasian states, that depends on Russian equipment. Now, what I suggest instead is that there might be an opportunity to move towards establishment of some sort of security community, at least if not entire Central Asia-Caucasus region, but 5 stones of Central Asia. Why is that? Because first of all, Russian invasion of Ukraine presented a new threat to most of the Central Asian countries, and that is threat to territorial integrity and sovereignty of these states. Now, they understand that most of Central Asian countries, they have a tangible size of Russian population, particularly the countries which are bordering with Russia. And given the irredentist policy of Russia, there's a high risk that if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, Central Asian countries will face the same scenario. Now, to address this, Central Asian countries can come together and form certain form of institution which brings the region together in order to collaborate or foster cooperation with each other. This may not necessarily be a kind of security alliance, which is, of course, far from practical at this moment, but at least this could be a first step towards a sort of regionalism, which creates some sort of information sharing, collaboration, exchange of ideas, but also they can start cooperating on certain soft issues and move on to the next tangible issues in future. Anyway, so I will stop here. The next topic is on the prospect of economics in the region in the light of both COVID, but also Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Omar. Omar is our scholar, so he knows how to speak, how to make a good impression. So we started from him using this opportunity. So I'm not as good as Omar, but I'll try to be short. Of course, it's not easy to identify or to assess the whole impact of all these conflicts or events we have been experiencing during the last 3 years, starting from COVID and ending with a Russian invasion to Ukraine. Even checking the World Bank data, we found out that estimations for 2021 is still under consideration, probably. They are not reported and they are indicated as estimation or forecast. So I think that there is a big issue with the methods, how to evaluate, how to assess which kind of methodology should be used in order to get the maximum clear, transparent, and reliable information. Because you know that some of countries, even my country, Uzbekistan, provided official and non-official information. So statistical data is not as reliable as we wish. So let me start from population. So you know that in Central Asia, the Caucasus and Mongolia, the total number of population is actually 3 times less than in the USA. However, we are still making a 125 million people in our region. So actually, we wanted you to see how big the population in each of our countries. Because next slide, please. You will see how GDP, so this is a main economic indicator. So GDP of our countries, we try to show how different it is, starting from the highest one of Kazakhstan, ending with, of course, Afghanistan, but before that, Tajikistan. But when you see GDP per capita, you can see that actually some of those countries who has less population, but they have a bigger GDP, like Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan, GDP per capita. So some well-being of population is quite different in our region. For integration, for economic integration, we know that actually almost the same level of economic development is required. In our region, it's quite different. It differs from country to country. Next slide, please. Oh, just a second. Can you please give us a previous slide? The second table shows the difference. So how COVID affected GDP per capita. So you can see the red one is shows that slightly decrease. But in fact, as I said, the negative impact of COVID can be seen even in a longer term. So several years we will have this negative impact on our economies, on our social life due to COVID. And this is actually common for all countries all over the world. Next slide, please. Yes, and as Omar has already mentioned, Russia is a big elephant in the room. So since we've been a part of USSR, most of our countries in CIS still have this Soviet-style common economy. And also we're still having Russia in the top 3 list of trading partners. So dependence of our economies with Russian trade and with the Russian partners are quite big. So also, most of our Central Asian countries, despite Georgia or Azerbaijan, sending a lot of labor migrants to Russia. So, and our dependence on those remittances shown in the next slide, you can see. But before that, you can, before that, you can see some interesting facts that we not only workers, but also our dependence in natural resources. So we're selling and we're buying then again our natural resources from Russian companies, and also oil supply pipelines. Our oil supply pipelines go through Russia. So next slide, please. Yeah, here you can see the dependence of our GDPs, Central Asian and some Azerbaijan also. You can see on these tables. Georgia is very lucky because they are not so dependent on remittances. However, export and trading with Russia is also significant for all of the countries. Next slide, please. Yes, as I said, COVID made a significant effect. But on the other side, this is actually for all the countries. COVID gave us a big reason to transfer to digital services, to digitalize, for digitalization, we call it. So, and also, you all know that corruption is another big issue for our countries. But digitalization will help us to spur on this digitalization and transparency to ensure that corruption will be empowered by making it transparent using digital technologies. And also, we had another idea with our colleagues, with our fellows, to tell us more, to tell you more about logistics and necessity to make it digital, to make it transparent, to make it not like, as it is now, but also make it more progressive, so we can actually integrate our logistics. And since I represent Uzbekistan, which is one of the 2 only countries in the world, double landlocked countries, I am very concerned about logistics. And we need to find a proper way to export our goods or to import the goods. So, and using now available ports in Batumi or other neighboring countries, we're still concerned about logistics. And digitalization would help us, all of our countries, to improve the situation, because corruption on borders is a big deal for us now. Also, next slide, please. If we consider that current problems and economic sanctions will somehow move out Russia from the market, who will come to support or to deal with us? So China can actually be interested in having more progressive relationship with our countries. But you can see that Russia-Central Asia trade currently stands around 18 billion, but China also has a very good figure starting from 90s, and also China makes a big investments in the form of credits, loans, and recently China also had this practice of having some lands in when payback period came. So Tajikistan gave part of their lands to China for those credits, and this is a very negative experience. And of course, having China on our in the list of our partners will create a new challenges and risks for each of our countries. Next slide, please. Yes, and here also I will wrap up the economic part. Of course, economic part is very huge, and to cover all issues, it's impossible for me or for my colleagues within the 10 or 5 minutes. So that's why what I would like to say, that integration within the region is quite important, and having some obstacles in our economic partnership with our Central Asian countries, with Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan, we will not be able to move forward. But better diplomacy and some economic interactions in order to have some sort of unit or united efforts towards some not a trade unions, but some good sorry I lost my I lost my mind somehow. So Konul, I will give a floor to you in order to stop. Yeah.
Thank you, Nadira. Thank you, Omar. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here with you right now and present a very crucial topic on food security. We all as a group put our inputs and contributions to come up with a pile of solutions that we hope will make a significant contribution, and we will make bold steps to eliminate the results of the recent hardships that our region is going right now. So let's first start about what the food security is. So just a brief description about what the food security is. Food security exists when all people at all times have economic and physical access to safe, sufficient, and nutritious food, which meets their daily dietary needs and helps them to stay healthy, happy, and active. So, you know, it's a very big issue in the global world, but I won't go to the reasons in the global world. I'll just come with the CAMCA region, to the Central Asian Caucasus region, just to make it brief. There are big challenges for that, but the most actual challenges and difficulties right now in our region we are facing is the climate change. It's still there, and the results of climate change, unfortunately, it's going to last for a long period of time. The second we have is COVID-19. We are still in a post-pandemic period. We're still facing the challenges, and these challenges makes vulnerable most of all our regions, which consist of developing countries. And the most recent one is one more hardship that we have right now is Ukrainian-Russian conflict, war, which affects all the globe, but mostly our region, because we are neighbors, we're too close for these regions, and most of our countries are very dependent on this. Just a couple of numbers I would like to say that before Russian invasion, Ukraine was responsible for 12% of the wheat, exported wheat to the world, and 16% of crop, and 32% of sunflower production. These are huge numbers. And meanwhile, Russia and its ally Belarus, they are the world's leading fertilizer exporters. So just imagine that 2 months conflict made Ukraine unrail to plant, harvest, and export its crops. But meanwhile, the farmers all the world are suffering from purchasing fertilizers. So that means we all as a globe, especially CAMCA region, will face very bad challenges in next season, I mean next autumn, when it will be time for harvesting. But there's a room for optimism. I would say we still can recover our agricultural system. Certainly we need to revise all the cycle of agricultural cycle from production to consumption, and apply most advanced scientific knowledge, guiding principles, and surely we need to go from the roots, from the knowledge, from the education. Can we move the slides, please? Okay, so I spoke about the challenges, but let's go through the opportunities. So the most important one is to minimize to increase the food self-sufficiency in all our countries. The best way not to be dependent on someone, especially on such a big aggressor, which we have in our neighborhood, is to make our own farmers to work better than they are working right now. It takes lots of policy making, advancing the technologies, investing in nanotechnologies, I've started from the okay. No, I'm rid of some. Okay, just let me do. So the first one, which is very important, is food self-sufficiency. The second one is enlargement and diversification of the farms. This takes lots of experience from other countries and lots of trading, but still it's a thing that we need some support from other big countries where these technologies are still available to apply these technologies to our countries. And diversification of import markets, it's very crucial to have new trade agreements with other countries other than Russia for importing and exporting our goods. And one of the solutions that we have is stabilizing the market prices. It means the creation of wholesale distribution centers to avoid food shortages, price swings, seasonal price swings, and to create infrastructure for the farmers to supply, storage, and make a revision of their goods. And also we need to pay attention to food loss, which has very high figures. I don't want to go to them, but the food loss is also a very significant topic for another panel. So in conclusion, what I would like to say that all these struggles made vulnerable our region. But the pandemic in Europe, pandemic triggered very effective joint cooperation between European countries. That's a fact which is very well known. And what we need, that CAMCA region also needs a dynamic engagement to cope the challenges that we are facing right now. So we can avoid this nightmare and replace it with a world where no one needs to starve. So the only thing we need to do, we have a solutions. The only thing we need to do is to act, is to have a will to act on them. Thank you very much.
So it's impossible to speak after this great orator, so I'll stand here and so no possible solutions. What can we do? We all heard all these circumstances, situations. It might be difficult to realize without the support of intergovernmental mechanism from these countries, but strengthening Central Asian financial cooperation is very crucial to us right now. The thing is, how do we do this? Yesterday, we had this conversation with Assistant Secretary Donald Liu, And I asked specifically about this question, whether the idea of pushing an idea of establishing a financial integration between the countries is crucial. He said it's absolutely great idea. It's absolutely great idea. The idea is this: Central Asian Development Bank could be one of the solutions that we could pursue. Because so far, right now, there's no substantial, multilateral financial mechanism or institution that focused solely on Central Asia. I think Asian Development Bank is solely doing on Central Asia through this Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation platform, where they do is pretty much substantially focus on research. But we need some physical, mechanism to make it happen. For example, Central Asian Development, through Central Asian Development Bank, we could have all of our potential projects to be financed. And then it could be also complementary institution as opposed to all the other international financial institutions like ADB and World Bank and International Finance Corporation, etc. And then other possible solution, the second possible solution, in my opinion, is that perhaps one of our countries could be the host of International Financial Center. International Financial Center is a relatively new idea that has been created by the United Kingdom, and it's spreading pretty much all over the developing countries, starting from Egypt and also in Russia, Moscow. And I think Uzbekistan is also pursuing that. And Kazakhstan has already signed this agreement to establish this International Financial Center in Almaty. And Mongolia is doing it as well. So everybody's doing it. So there's got to be some, institution that is solely focused on the financial and capital market issues. The idea is this. I mean, this IFC, International Financial Center, will enable foreign potential investors and companies to register within the zone easily, and offers tax and non-tax incentives. And then free money flow circulations among the countries, whereas now Russia has this problems with their, capital flow and the money flow, monetary flow, and whereas China has this zero COVID tolerance policy. So I think this is the opportunity for us right now to take a look at these ideas. And next slide, please. This is one of the two. This is the two ideas. So also the most crucial points that we're making is private sector's engagement. Without energy infrastructure, there will be no foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment comes when the market is open and government is stable, and also we're done. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it okay? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So free market system and good governance, stable political environment, and good judiciary system. So, as you know, that now the just COP26 summit, many countries, almost 20 plus countries, and then also multi international financial institutions signed a pact to stop financing fossil fuel projects, and even China signed that. So energy future has this transition that is shifting from brown economy to green economy. So in green economy, we think that the renewable energies, right? So if Central Asian countries would actively engage into these activities, then there will be great opportunities for us to access to easier financing for our renewable projects. So this is where the energy infrastructure, and without logistics, yeah, it's obvious that now, as we can obviously see that China is the mother of all supply chain disruption. So I think this will continue for a period of time. And meanwhile, we have to find a solution how to tackle these problems on this logistics. Perhaps also create a intergovernmental mechanism where the Ministry of Trade and trade agencies of all our countries join together, set up this supply chain networking, and starting with the non-political dialogue. Well, this is the solutions that we tried to come up with. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. Our audience certainly has expertise in many of these areas. I urge you to consider a pointed question to our panelists and perhaps to other of our fellows who may have something to add. If you do, please let me know. In the meantime, I'll start with a question or two. The first, it seems to me, that comes out of your presentation is the whole issue of where both cooperation, cooperative institutions, and also security comes from. In the past, there has been a tendency to either assume that this is going to come from outside, or accept that the reality is that somebody is imposing cooperative institutions on your region and imposing security mechanisms on your region. It seems to me that what you're saying is that this is no longer feasible, given the multiple crises that you mentioned, and that it might be time for this type of both security and cooperative institutions to be coming from within the region. If that's correct, if I'm right or wrong, please elaborate. I'll hand the mic to whoever would like to start.
Well, if you look at the Central Asia, but also other regions similar to Central Asia in terms of lack of integration, Middle East, for instance, Central Asia is the least integrated region in terms of trade, infrastructure, political organizations, common security, integration. One of the key challenges to lack of integration was, I think, existence of a foreign great power, which didn't allow the region to come together, and that is Russia. But apart from that, Central Asian countries are also quite young. We're talking about countries who are 30 years old. And I think it takes time for them to come out of that security dilemma, that insecurity which exists in the kind of policy analysis, policy network of these countries. Now, why it is time for these countries to come together? I think still it is early to talk about some sort of integration in the region, but however, certain elements are there which may push towards some sort of regionalism. Number one, as I highlighted, it's a common security threat to the region, and one could be in the south, which is Islamic radicalism, but at the same time in the north, that is an irredentionist policy of a great regional country, which is Russia. So these two threats together may bring the region to rethink about possible avenues to join together and collaborate. Now, what are the models of regionalism? What we have is in Southeast Asia, there is a different model. In the European Union, it's a different Union. Europeans started from non-political dimension, for example, cooperation over coal. And then it moved on. It took a long time for European countries to reach to this stage of a kind of establishing a very supranational institution. For East Asian countries, the journey towards regionalism has been quite different. East Asian countries learned how to have kind of omniscient policy, wherein they could have tied global powers and regional powers together. You have China, you have Australia, you have Japan, you have at the same time great power like United States, which have most of these they have divergent security interests. However, the Southeast Asian Association, they have been able to create multiple forms in order to tie these great powers together. For example, at one level, they have Asian Plus, but at the other level, they have security partners. And thirdly, they also have Asian Forum, which adds up most of these great powers apart from the Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries. Now, what Central Asian countries do is, I think, take a very first preliminary steps toward drawing some commonalities among these countries. what are the areas where they can start with. And that, I suppose, would be not security, because of the quite challenge. I think the challenges that they are highly dependent on Russia still. But there could be some other kind of areas, given, for example, how to address food security in the region. Or for example, how to establish common financial institutions, or for example, how to boost trade in the region. These could be avenues where the region can work together in order to move towards certain form of regionalism.
Thank you. What I wanted to add that actually we had a lot of meetings, we have a lot of conversations, and maybe some of the same we now discuss here already known, but let us see why. For me, it's just a it's a pity that we are looking for someone bigger who will help us, who will support us, who will finance us, who will be responsible for us. Actually, each of our country has its own sovereignty, and we are independent, right, for more than 30 years already. So why not we collaborate and not wait for someone bigger, stronger to come and solve our problems? And also, we in Uzbekistan, we mostly rely on foreign investment, etc. We're waiting for some grants for loans, credits, but actually we are number one in selling our gold. In Central Asia, in Caucasus, we have a lot of natural resources, but I don't want our country to be considered as a source of natural resources. We are not a primary sector country anymore. You can just look some figures in Wikipedia even and see that, for example, Georgia is one of the leaders in with the economic reforms, right? In 2007, I think Georgia was number one in the West significant economic reforms. And in corruption ranking, Georgia has the best 45th, I think, rank among the other countries in the region. So Mongolia 37th. Sorry, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. So, and what I wanted to say, if we look, okay, Russia is dealing with the Ukraine and it's busy with the one crisis. Sanctions will actually not allow to be focused on anything else. China is interested, but China will not come and support us. It will just make money on us, frankly speaking, I think. And so who will be on the floor? Turkey. Turkey has its own economic issues now, but it's ready to sell us some weapons, some techniques, to sell us services, right? So nothing for free. So what we need to do to pay or to do it together, to support each other, to be reliable, to have trust between our countries, and not waiting for someone to come and to fight for us. We can do it ourselves. So what we need to create some joint institutions, as Irmun said during his presentation part. So we need to find joint solutions to cooperate in order to bring, to enhance our results. And of course, we have some, on the one hand, we have some similarities. For example, living in Uzbekistan, being a citizen of Uzbekistan, I am ethnic Tajik. Or we have a lot of Uzbek in Tajikistan. We have a lot of Kyrgyz in Uzbekistan. So we are ethnically very integrated, let's say. But we need to think about possibilities, opportunities we have. We can understand each other easily, not with Caucasus, with Georgia, or with Azerbaijan. We can actually understand each other. We have the same Turkic language roots, but with Georgia, we have the same interests, wine, or other food stuff, right? So we still have some interest in each other. Why not to work on them? Why not to do everything that we can? We are strong enough. So since Singapore is being a very small country, made a significant economic development within 30 years, we can do this. I believe the only thing we need to do, start from ourselves, start from our internal issues, as corruption, as I said, as a rule of law enhancement, and also partnership within some joint institution, having in mind our ideas that we actually bring partially from USA, from other developed countries, and using the best international experience. So I think that one of the main ideas of this program is to make us capable to develop that kind of organizations and institutions. Thank you.
So I think after the war conflict in Ukraine, I think my best guess is that substantial portion of our all international capital and official development assistances and foreign direct investments will go to Ukraine. Whereas China has this zero COVID policy, and that these will cause substantial economic impacts to our region. So I think we have to find our own way to sustainably finance ourselves by promoting a responsible extractive industry, perhaps, because we have really good untapped natural resources. So I think this is one of the selling points that we have to have in our mind in the future as well. Thank you.
And also innovations are very important in order to bring us to the next level, to make us less reliable, less depending to other countries who are mainly look at us as a source of natural resources.
Thank you. Paul Joyal has a question or a comment. I'm not quite sure which.
I think the importance of excellent point about innovation are related to my question. I had the pleasure of working with the organization, Georgian Innovation Technology. My question is, what are and by the way, we have a winner here of the competition to keep up. What are you doing to grow? What are you doing to grow new businesses? What are you doing to put in education programs to educate some of the hard sciences, some of the IT areas, cybersecurity, et cetera, that are in great demand? What are you doing to actually encourage the development of new corporations to participate in your economy, to keep your people there, keep the best and the brightest in country versus exporting them? And so that's my question. Do you have programs such as what the Georgian has? And let me just pass the mic for any comments that you may have.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Georgia has done tremendous job in that regard, creating ecosystem and helping young people to have grant support in the terms of development, small and medium-sized businesses. I myself am a winner of the JITA project, which was innovative platform created for farmers, mobile application called Agronavti, using artificial intelligence and helping to actually respond to food security and access to international technology, as well as having one window principle, having all kind of information in one application. So I think that's a great opportunity, not only for Georgians, but for others as well, because we've been able to show, let's say, show lessons learned to other countries, developed countries, and they are now trying to replicate our application. So I think that's a really great opportunity, because without private sector, economy doesn't work, and especially small and medium-sized businesses are drive of the economy. So I think those kind of synergies can be also respond to our presentations that we've done, how to unite the CAMCA region.
Reactions from the panel. Who would like to start? Yes.
I'll tell about Uzbekistan. Since start of the war, a lot of Russian IT specialists moved to Central Asian countries and to Georgia as well. So, and what we did we use this opportunity by providing zero tax, by providing a lot of list of preferences and bonuses for them, for their families, by helping them and creating special groups where they can find easily information on, so we call them reluctance, relocation now is a big, good, positively treated fact for us. And we are going to use their experience and also to build up teams where local guys and girls will learn how to develop mobile apps, how to make innovations by using their experience. And also what we do, we in Uzbekistan, our Ministry of Public Education in cooperation with the UK government, they are reconsidering where, how to say it, rewriting a curriculum for public schools and also for private schools, for opening up private schools. There are a lot of bonuses. Of course, it's another one-day change. It will take time, but anyway, it is now under the big focus of the government, and we are working on in this field. But there is still a big room for let's say innovations in agriculture, not only MOBAP. Maybe MOBAP is not the best way to improve, to enhance agricultural production. So some significant tangible tools, equipment, maybe innovations are needed to change, to make countries not only agricultural, but mostly oriented on selling innovations, on selling information on not information but services online. I think that would be also another topic for Uzbekistan within maybe 1-2 years, upcoming years. Thank you.
I believe in a very less involvement of government to especially in the innovation sector, which is Mongolian policy towards that direction. Many of our Mongolian fintech companies are now operating in Central Asian countries, starting with the Kyrgyzstan, right? So and also we also doing many fintech projects in Southeast Asian countries, starting with Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, and Philippines. So yeah, I think as I just mentioned, I mean, less involvement from the government is better.
Yeah, I think. Can I make
on the? Do you want to add to the question?
Yes, to the question. Yes, I just want to say to Paul's question that what we're doing in this regard is that we are doing several things. I would speak about Tajikistan, and I'm sure we, as CAMCA region, we exchange experiences. One of the main things that we're doing educational reforms to make sure our younger generations have easily adapt to changing environment. And recently we adapted a new tax code. So that's to be more favorable for foreign investment and local entrepreneurs. Also, we're working really hard on creating a better ecosystem for startups and entrepreneurs in our region, as well as teaching our startuppers to work with venture capitals and all that. So this is what direction that we're really going right now. So.
I just want to add some about Azerbaijan. Since 2015, our government made tremendous reforms on anti-corruption of the borders, of making the business, to make it easier to create a business. So right now what we have lots of tax-free zones where you can start your production. And actually my company is now on its way to open the production in this kind of tax-free zone. And as a current resident of the zone, I can see that it really works. And the bureaucracy is not I wouldn't say 0%, no, but it's not as much as we supposed it to have. We have really transport custom systems. We can do customs via application, which is very rare in post-Soviet Union countries. And all universities, they have accelerators, high-tech parks, which is also financed by the government. And we have a COBIA. It's a new entity which supports small and medium businesses. They have financial supports. They provide rooms, places to do the business. there's a room to develop, very room to go forward, but it's good that something actually happens in a positive way.
I would just urge everyone to have a real discussion about the lessons learned in Gita. We've been at this for over 5 years now, and there's a lot of lessons that you can learn. But to grow businesses, it's more than a tax code. It's more than some beneficial room. They need tutelage. You need to have a facility. You need to have mentors. You need to create an ecosystem. And the government now, I arranged for tours in Silicon Valley Bank, Apple, big companies, the Bay Area Council, et cetera, to create that network that we can bring entrepreneurs and put them in front of investors, et cetera. So, and now the Georgian embassy has a consulate that is absolutely there to service this type of ecosystem. So it takes a lot to do this, but creating a center, an accelerator for startups, which they have in Tbilisi, that has all the equipment for entrepreneurs to begin, has had a dramatic effect. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned if this is your goal, to create a vibrant, innovative public sector, private sector.
Please, Mamuka. Please.
Just to let you know, we had conducted Technovations International contest among the girls in order to engage them in STEM. And our team got second place in the Google competition, as far as I know. And the first one went to Kazakhstan, as far as I remember. Zaure, maybe you remember? So Kazakhstan team has won the first prize, I think, from Google, Technovation Girls. So we are trying. We're making a very, very small steps. Unfortunately, I wish we could do better, but still, we're trying to do it. And in some rural areas, but mostly, unfortunately, as of now, mostly financed by international institutions, not by local institutions or NGOs. So in order to ensure sustainability, it would be better to have this initiative be done by private sector, or some local institutions, not a foreign, like a UN, UNDP, others, because it's a short-term project. And after that, it will be good. But anyway, I think that those girls, once they are trained, they can then share knowledge. They can go to schools and anyway, make some efforts to engage other girls or boys even to those activities, and just say how to do it, where to go with their ideas. And also we had with some Korean university in Tashkent, we had a startup mix, which is usually monthly pitching sort of. So a lot of investors comes and sits in front of a potential startupper, and he or she delivers his or her idea and tries to get investment. That was the first stage actually, and 3 or 4 years ago it was launched, and we still have this kind of activities, but only repetitive or many times repeating this initiative in different areas, including rural areas, will bring us some significant output, I think. Thank you.
Mamuka, you?
I don't have a question. I just wanted you to look at question from the audience. Okay.
I saw that question.
Okay.
I'm keeping it for a rainy day.
Okay.
We may run out of questions at some point.
No,
in which
actually,
case
I'll comment one thing,
Please.
just following up on this last statement. Yes, it's important to have persistency and diligence in terms of effort, and it's not going to happen overnight. And even Gita that Paul was mentioning and the organization from Georgia, it took years before we arrived to the point when now these companies are raising funds in California, actually raising significant funds, millions of dollars for some of the startup projects in Georgia. So definitely persistence is important. But my question is about, now I have a question, Mr. Moderator. So you mentioned in your presentation in one of the earlier slides about lack of connectivity between the region. And maybe somebody can comment on that, where you see potential improvements in that regard, and where you see potential for countries to be better connected, because without that, there will be no future for regional collaboration and really reducing dependency on the larger powers, particularly from the north. So anybody who, okay.
Thank you, Kamka, for this question. The last circumstances in Ukraine, it shows that this north corridor is not reliable, and it was always discussion that the alternative should be in the region, and this is definitely most safe is the middle corridor. So Caucasus comes through Caucasus, through Azerbaijan and then Georgia, and then to connect it to Europe. There are several initiatives on this part. The first is already Nadira also mentions that digitalization and to simplify the procedures on the cross-border issues for the movement of the cargoes. The second very important part is the infrastructure development, and we see that even at this moment, Kazakhstan is not now, but definitely will be in a problem where how to export their energy resources to Europe, and then there might be some new initiatives for connecting it to Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, and other existing pipelines and Kazakhstan's oil and gas part. And plus, there is also very important also on the electricity side, because this old Soviet infrastructure was connected through the cycle to including the Russia, and then there is a lack of infrastructure between these Central Asian countries, especially, and then even in the Caucasus as well. So these initiatives on the connectivity definitely will be supported from the international organizations and from the Western countries, and then this trade will be stimulating relationship and to make closer this country's economies to each other.
By the way, if I may, little comment, a lot of people may not know, but during the war, actually, in early March, Ukraine was decoupled from Russian electricity system and was synchronized with the European Union electricity system, as well as Moldova. So I think this is important to think about how infrastructure can be decoupled from the unreliable kind of networks. But that's a separate, obviously, big task, because this project is supposed to get enacted in 2023 for Ukraine and Moldova, but it was accelerated because of the war situation there. But it's possible. That's my comment. Thank you.
Well, you passed the microphone to Professor Starr. I'd like you to, if anybody wants to chime in on this, but with an added twist. I think you mentioned several things, and we know, focusing on this region, working with this region, there's a lot happening if you compare it to what the situation was 15 or 20 years ago. But there's an information problem. The information problem is partly within the region. One country doesn't know what the other one is doing, but more broader, people outside have absolutely no idea of the achievements that are happening in every imaginable walk of life in Central Asia and the Caucasus. Please.
Hi, my name is Ermik. I work as an editor. Just want to say a couple of words about the, since we are talking about the security issues, I want to add a couple words about the fake, the misinformation, the disinformation, and the fake news going on in Central Asia. It's also very actual, hot topic, which is going on for several years. The TV remains as a major source of information still, but the younger generation are using internet a lot. And we have during the COVID-19 times, during the war in Ukraine and fall of Kabul, we had lots of different kind of, let's say, fake news and speculation going on. So being very shortly, speaking very frankly, we need to develop journalism, and we need to raise the media literacy in Central Asia. And I think maybe my colleague Zaure will say a little about it.
I'm a founder of a media company called The Step in Central Asia. And yes, what we face is that we're lacking of, there are no professional journalists. So what we do usually, we spend a lot of time educating them. And in fact, for me, I will benefit if, we'll have a lot of journalists coming from even villages, different part of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. And in schools, I know that they practice giving those classes like around the world. And in fact, I think that if we will do at least pilot programs, let's say funded by any organization or NGO that will support that, and we can try to do it in schools so that kids from the beginning, they will know where is or at least they will have this critical thinking. For now, what I see is that there is a shift between elders and young people. Since where I'm representing that part of youth, let's say elders, they would go watch TV, which is Russian propaganda is there, and obviously we know it. And then if we talk about youth, so it's hard to track them because they're shifting from one social network to another. And for that, as I said, I mean, it's very important to have these courses in schools as well as universities. For example, just so that you understand the scale of the problem of lacking of this, let's say, professional journalists. We have one university called KIMEP, and they have this journalist faculty. So all of their students, the only place they can want to apply is my job, my team, because for them it's more, relevant, because we're a young team. They want to work with us. They don't want to go to any old school newsroom which is controlled, or they don't want to go to any TV station, right? So the only place we are, but I cannot afford myself to keep them whole. So there are so many interns during the summer. But again, as I said, the more media companies we have, the more competition we have, the better it will be for the market. And for example, I would say Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan is the most progressive in freedom of speech. I mean, there are some restrictions, but still, I mean, Kyrgyzstan is quite ahead of us, but still. And then if we talk about Uzbekistan, we could have a joint program. How can, so that this course will go around Central Asia, Uzbekistan as well, and Tajikistan, so that we can increase it. There are some courses like that around in Kazakhstan by NGOs, like USA doing it, but it's not much. There should be more opportunities for, I'd say, media. But in general, I see that there is a global trend that it's hard to track what's happening in social networks, and like any media is struggling now for now. But if you look at Afghanistan, I would say nothing worked actually, like not the media, not social networks in a way that preventing that from coming to, straight like Taliban and stuff. So it's kind of a big issue for now in the whole region, not only us. Yeah, thank you.
Something concerning your questions, there are good things going on in the countries, and there is no PR and promotion, right? So that's a worst part. That's what, like me as a Georgian, and complaining about the Georgian government, and I'm sure that everyone does the same. So I don't think that the government has a proper propaganda and proper information dissemination saying that, we've done this. And actually what's going on is that the media is eager to broadcast the worst thing what's going on, the bad thing what's going on, and not the good thing what's going on. So in that regard, we don't have information among countries, which country has done what. And what we see is that sometimes, for example, Georgia is used as an example, right? Everyone said that, we've done tremendous things. We've changed the policy, the corruption level is 0 now, and etc. So sometimes even governments, they don't like to bring another country as a role model. So that's what I think that's the attitude that, information doesn't flow properly country by country, if I answered your question.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to pass the floor to Fred Starr, but I noticed that you mentioned government, and the government has the responsibility for information. If you're going to wait for the government to put your information up in the world, you'll have to wait a long time. And what we've been talking about is how people from Central Asia, the Caucasus, Mongolia, Afghanistan themselves have to be part of informing the world and making news, if you will, about what's going on. You can't wait for the government to do it. Developing journalism at home is a great idea, but that serves a different purpose, and only secondarily to make sure people elsewhere in the world know what's going on in this part of the world. Professor Starr.
Well, listening to these very, very interesting presentations, you could easily come to the conclusion that in this part of the world, society is moved in advance of the state, that the state is lagging behind. Now, there are many possible reasons for this. One is they have so much unfinished business from the past, things that have to be cleaned up. This is pachmiel. Another reason is that they're older, and they mentally, people in the States just don't get it. They don't see what you see. Or there could be other reasons. There could be fear. There could be anxiety, a lack of imagination, but you've mentioned all these things that should be done and could be done, yet they've been talked about for 20 years. And what's wrong with the governments that no one is willing to stick his neck out and make it happen?
Do you want to add something? Well, let me just add a couple of comments on the question that you asked. Today, I think Reporters Without Borders released their report, and in that, I think there's an improvement, slight improvement across the region in terms of access to information and free press, except Afghanistan and Georgia. Georgia has fallen from 60 to 89, and Afghanistan, of course, because of the Taliban, it has fallen down to the line. I mean, there is so much room for improvement, and of course, you don't have access to information until and unless there's democracy in the country. So the institutional infrastructure matters in terms of political system, and the region from Azerbaijan to Afghanistan, except Georgia, they are ruled by authoritarian rulers. So that's why access to information or the information coming out of the region is of course challenged by that. On connectivity, two conditions are, I think, the prerequisite for connectivity. One is transformation from an anarchical world order towards a rule-based order. I mean, the region so far has been struggling with this. The border dispute between either Tajikistan to Kyrgyzstan or Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan or Armenia, Azerbaijan, that indicates that the region is still in a kind of anarchical order. That's number one. Second is you need political stability in the region. Countries like Afghanistan that face turmoil each decade, it poses a challenge towards connectivity. For example, whether it's CASA 1000 transmission line from Tajikistan or it's TAPI, which is transforming gas from Turkmenistan. Many of these projects depend on a stable governance, and that is what the region should work on it. Without political stability, without a rule-based order, and without infrastructure which is required, connectivity may not be feasible in the near future.
Any answers to Professor Starr's question? Aside from that. Well, we have only a few minutes left. It seems to me that there is one question. You talked about an elephant in the room, pointing north, as we say. But I think the real question, and that connects to your point about, whether you have a rules-based or an anarchical world order. It seems to me we're not heading in any kind of direction that looks like a rules-based. We're heading the other direction. Now, in your part of the world, this is a problem because you talk about the lack of cooperation. Well, why is there a lack of cooperation? Well, for a long time it was, yes, the states had to build their own institutions, they had to put statehood first and so on. But also, I think some of you mentioned that, the great powers don't want you to cooperate independently of them. They want to organize things from the outside. Well, and why don't you just say no? Well, because you're afraid. You're afraid that something can happen, something nasty can happen. And that brings me back to the security point. You cannot wait for a norms-based international order to emerge. You might have to wait a long time in this part of the world. So you have to do something on your own. And several states have tried this. And what they've concluded is that you have to build on your own resources, which actually strengthens deterrence simply by building stronger defense forces, not asking somebody else to solve your problems, but asking for means to solve your own problems by building strong defense forces and stable, societies or state institutions that are not infiltrated by foreign powers. And that in turn makes you able to withstand when the foreign power wants to throw their weight around. You can just say no with a little bit of confidence if you have security institutions that have capabilities. Is this a dream, or is this the way, a direction that will be necessary even for the cooperation in other spheres of life rather than the security?
Well, if I may, third world countries, as Mohammed Ayub, one of the scholars of ours, argues, their threat towards national security is not coming from outside. It's primarily coming from inside. And it's because these countries are authoritarian. The ruler in the country is much more concerned how to save power for his own or his dynasty rather than external threat. So that's why I think most of these countries, instead of building up their own self-sufficient defense system, and the governance structure is so corrupt that the rulers cannot deliver good governance. And I think a prerequisite for self-sufficient defense system would be a kind of efficient governance structure and overall, not just on defense. If the governance is poor, if there's corruption, you cannot expect the government to do much better in terms of national security or in terms of its countering its threat which is coming out of the region. And that's why most of the rulers in the region, of course, the first generation, they were dependent on Russia. For example, whether it's Imam Ali Rahman in Tajikistan or the others, which were somehow reinforced through foreign support. So that till the time you do not address the question of authoritarianism in the region, it's much more difficult to move on to the.
May I ask Cornel if you agree with me? Because it seems to me that Afghanistan is a country that is derided for its corruption still.
Actually, I totally agree with you. We, as a society, had very difficult times in struggling with autocracy, which we have right now. And we saw that nothing is done in the country. Everything is just going, all the money which comes from oil and our resources just going to the places where we don't see, because we are not as wealthy as we're supposed to be in compare with our resources that we have. But after the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh Second War, I would say that our society shifted on the approach on that, because we saw that there's a good defense system which we have right alliances. Lots of countries helped us in weapons, in support, and we could restore our right of sovereignty, of territorial sovereignty. And we did it by paying by buying, by purchasing all the weapons and also what we need, the technology. So now what I would say in our region, the mindset is like that the governance is not so bad as it was supposed to think about it. And taking into account that Azerbaijan is a small country, weak country, actually, young country, and we are sandwiched by big and developed not developed, but big and powerful countries like Iran, which has very super soft power on us in terms of religion. We have Turkey, we are partners, but still it's a partner with whom you have to collaborate. And we have partner like Russia, with whom we have mutual background and high dependence, even relationship in terms of relativeness of the people of in the government. So it's very hard just to build own independent governance. And we don't have a civil society in a level as you wanted it to have, because if you go to even in Baku, if you ask someone what is a government and just basic questions about what it doesn't mean, many people won't say you the right questions. The civil society is not as educated as it's supposed to be. So we can't expect too much things about the region.
Thank you. I think Mamuka has indicated that we're out of time. We will stop here. However, I think I would end on a more positive note than many of you have. I think that this is a classic question of whether the glass is half full or half empty. It seems to me that when you're closely looking into all of this, you see all kinds of problems. I think we have serious problems. You started the whole presentation by talking about the 3 crises. On the other hand, if you look at where the states of the region are today, most of them compared to where they were even 5 years ago, I think there are serious changes that have been made, and there is a realization, I think, on political leaderships in not all, but most of the countries that serious change to the way the countries are run are needed. The question is, how do you make it happen? It's not necessarily an easy one. But it seems to me that it is your generation and your people like you in these countries who are both in the private sector and inside of the government now already in positions to make things happen. If the Rumsfeld Fellowship has contributed to this in a small way, which I think it has, we are grateful for that. But I think you should not, my final word is you should not underestimate yourselves and your generation. With that, I'd like to thank you all for coming and for your presentation. Our next event, virtual one again, will be on Thursday, on the 5th, yes, in which we talk about the lessons from the January crisis in Kazakhstan. Thank you very much. We will adjourn and thank you. Join me in thanking our panelists and our other members.